Hey, this is David and Susan out here looking at our wood pile today. Got a couple pieces of wood here to talk about, and then we'll look at the wood pile over here. This is a piece of black walnut and a shingle oak, and we cut these down last year because they were in the way on the barn. And we cut them down, did not buck them up, so they've been laying there just barely up off the ground for a year. And it's interesting to look at. Come on over here, Susan, up close. So we got a little moisture meter recently, and it's really helped us evaluate our firewood. Anyway, so this has been on the ground a year, detached from the stump, and actually up off the ground. And we check the moisture on that, and it's right up 33, 34%. And you want to get this wood down to 20% or less to make good firewood. So that's interesting. So there we go, right at 30% there. And check it on the end. 32, 31. It's wet. Oh, interesting thing. You check it here in the sapwood, over 44%. And what happens on this wood when it's out here, when you've got a tree that's horizontal on the ground with the bark on it, that water sits here on this bark when it rains, and it soaks in. And it gets in this sapwood. The sapwood starts to break down quickly. It acts like a sponge, and it holds that rain right there on that tree. When you've got wood horizontal, it does not dry out in the woods. So, and that's pretty, and you can see how wet it is. I peeled some bark off, and it is just soppy wet. Let's see if we can pull this off, and it is. You can see it's just really, really wet there, and breaks down quick. And when it's horizontal, boy, it holds water. It's up over 44%. So you got to buck them up. And the shingle oak, it was also mostly horizontal, not bucked. And right there it tests 27%, 30%. Checking on the end grain here, 32%, 29. Getting the sapwood over 44%. So that sapwood is really key. If that tree's horizontal, that sapwood gets the rain, it holds it there, keeps your wood wet. You can't leave it laying in the woods. Anyway, what this meter tells us, this is the middle of January, 20th of January today, and we're 30% or more on this firewood. There's no point in stacking this at the house. You can take off 1 or 2% per week out here sitting under the eaves, and by the time we get down to 20%, we're going to have warm weather. So we're going to split this stuff up in the woods and put it in the barn. Now we'll come over here, we'll look at some other wood we've got here. We've got some hickory right here. This hickory was cut along our pipeline 2 years ago. And anyway, this was sitting on a slope. It was touching the ground. Hickory's got a really good bark for shedding rain. Of course, hickory rots quick too. But this bark, water runs off of it, and it was sitting on a steep slope. And what we've got here, anyway, this has been cut, what, 3-4 weeks? Went out and cut it and split it 3 or 4 weeks ago. And 22%. And check the end grain, 19%. Check the sapwood, 16%. So even though this was out in the woods, it was sitting on a slope, and the bark hadn't really rotted off too bad yet. Now that piece has some rot here under the bark, and it's wet when you get down here. 24%. That one's 12%. 12%. Anyway, that wood's getting pretty good. That was pretty good. Over here we've got some black oak. This black oak was cut on the pipeline 2 years ago. And of course it was laying on the ground. but it was in a good place. The water wasn't sitting in water. We bucked this up, what, 2 months ago? Bucked it up 2 months ago and split it, and that's right at 15%. That wood's burning really good now. Yeah, let's see, what's this one? 14%. Here's some white oak, same thing, on the ground in the woods, and we're at 11%, 10%. Another little piece of white oak, 12%. Come on down here. Here's, oh golly, where'd this hickory come from? This is 10%. This is some hickory we got out of the barn. This has been in the barn for almost a year. Split up 12%. That's burning really well. Here is some honey locust. This honey locust was on the ground on a slope, and it was dry when we cut it, and it is showing 14%. That's really good wood. Here's another piece of honey locust, 12%. This is some ash that we just cut. It was one we did a video with the other day. And this tree died this year. And we stick the meter in that, we're at 24%. Ash, when you cut it, ash is just about dry enough to burn already. So it's at 24%. And that one's 24%. And what we found with ash in a week it'll lose 3-4%. A couple of weeks that ash will be ready to burn, so we just went ahead and piled it here. And that one's showing 17%. 17%. So that ash, in a couple of weeks we can stick that ash in the stove. Down here we've got some cherry that we cut. Cut it last summer and bucked it up a month ago. It's under 10%. We've got some sassafras right here. Cut it last summer and bucked it up a month ago. It's at 10%. Here's some honey locust we cut. Didn't buck it up until about 3 weeks ago. 15%. That was over. It was over 25% when we bucked it. And now that's checking there. That one's 16%. So that's drying up quick. And we'll come on down here to the end.
We're rolling.
Okay, this is white oak that was cut along the pipeline 2 years ago. And it was up off the ground. It was sitting up on a hickory log, on hickory logs. And we cut it about 4 or 5 weeks ago. And it was 25%. When we cut it, it was 25%. It's too wet. You stick it in the stove and it'd sit there and it wouldn't light. And now I checked this one and it is 15%. So, 4 or 5 weeks, it's lost about, down to 15%. And it burns real good now, 15%. That wood is really burning good. And it didn't take long. You'll see it's getting end checks on it now. And anyway, that's really good. That one's just 14%. So if you get it under cover, get it out of the rain, and let the sun hit it for a few hours every day, it dries out pretty quick. Now if you cut a green tree, you're going to be up, over 40%. The way they measure moisture in a tree, you can have over 100% moisture. Your moisture is based on equal amounts. So like if you got a pound of wood and a pound of water, that's 100% moisture. So it's it's based on percentage of dry weight on the wood. So it's good to get it cut ahead of time, get it split in the barn.